Welcome to See You on the Other Side, where the world of the mysterious collides with the world of entertainment. A discussion of art, music, movies, spirituality, the weird, and self-discovery. And now, your hosts, musicians and entertainers who have their own weakness for the weird, Mike and Wendy from the band Sunspot.
Well, I gotta say, this episode where we talk about B-movies, low-budget films, and science fiction and horror, and get to talk to Joe Bob Briggs, who is a horror film nerd icon, is pretty exciting, as well as we get to promote an awesome film festival in Milwaukee. So, Wendy, I am terribly excited today.
Well, that's fantastic, Mike.
Yes.
And it is some local love here, again, for Wisconsin, but it applies to everybody.
It does.
And we had fun, and you really fanboyed out, I have to say, when we were in Austin and you did the interview with Joe Bob. That was fun to see you kind of lose it a little bit, Mike.
Yeah, I don't lose it too much because usually I'm pretty jaded and cynical about most things. Or I'm like, but I was like, oh man, it is a particular treat to talk to somebody. And you know that every time you make a movie reference, he's going to get it and then he's going to one-up you on it.
Right.
Right? Because he knows them all.
Right.
Today, we are talking about B-movies. So, first of all, we've been using that expression. We use that expression on the show all the time because a lot of horror and science fiction films that we talk about that are oftentimes inspired by real paranormal stories are lower budget.
Yes.
So, Wendy, the real question is, what does the word B-movie mean? What does it mean to you?
I always thought a B-movie was just kind of a low budget style of movie. So the makers didn't have the big Hollywood budget, so they had to do what they could with what they had.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that results in some humor maybe, or, a certain look or feel to the movie.
That's right. And that's kind of how we refer to it as today. Because when you look at the list of the best quote-unquote B-movies, there's a ton of movies made in the past, like 20 or 30 years that are on there. And basically now it just means low budget.
Okay.
So originally it meant to be the companion film of a double feature.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so in the 1940s and the 1950s, as they're promoting the drive-in culture, and people would go to the movies and they'd stay there all night and see a double feature. I mean, it's like almost a lost art now to go see a double feature. But when you go to the drive-in, you'd get there and there would be the A movie, which would be the main event kind of thing, and then there would be the B movie, which would be you went there to see the main event.
Yeah, it's like the opening band.
That's exactly right. So like Hollywood used to make opening bands for each of their shows. And
Cool.
in addition to the shorts, like the art of the cartoon short, like all the Bugs Bunny cartoons we grew up watching and things like that were all made to be shown in between the B movie and the A movie. So that idea that, okay, now you have a film that's going to draw people to the drive-in or draw people to the theater, and they expect something for their nickel. So, like
Right.
in those days, you paid for admission to the movie theater and you paid a nickel or whatever, and you got two movies, shorts, and sometimes the news. And today,
What a deal.
Yeah, today we get trailers, we get ads.
Right, so many ads.
And then we get more ads.
Ads for popcorn and
Right.
concessions.
But very infrequently do we get two movies for the price of one. So that was the
That's
idea.
true.
Like when Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez made the movie Grindhouse, like about 12 years ago now. The idea was that you have two features, both genre kind of things. Like Planet Terror was about a zombie invasion, and Death Proof is about a guy in his killer car kind of thing. And it was supposed to be a throwback to the days of going to the movie theater, seeing a double feature, and watching that, the main event and the B movie and the stuff in between. And so I only ever got to experience that at the drive-in.
Ah, okay.
Right? Because that's where we'd have double features. And I remember being, 6 or 7 years old, and my mother would always win tickets to the drive-in. And so we'd go see, like, we go see was at the drive-in. So you'd see, this is the year like Star Trek 2 came out and Rocky 3 came out, and there'd be some lower budget movie before that, before Rocky 3 or before Star Trek 2 or whatever. And like the B movie to those would be Roger Corman, he's a famous, like the cheapest director in history, and Roger Corman had been making movies, since the early 1960s, and he just makes super cheap exploitation films with horror, gore and stuff like that. Launched the careers of Francis Ford Coppola, who we'll talk about more in the interview that we have with the guys running the Twisted Dreams Film Festival in Milwaukee. He launched the career of Jack Nicholson. And
wow.
So you've seen Little Shop of Horrors, the musical, right, Wendy?
Yeah.
Okay. So Little Shop of Horrors is based on this movie from 1962 that Roger Corman directed that wasn't a comedy musical kind of thing. It was a horror movie about the plant that wanted to kill people or whatever. And then they created the musical based on that. And then they made the movie of the musical on it. So like you have something where a B movie inspires this super famous musical I remember seeing in the theater and everything.
Yeah.
And it's like Jack Nicholson plays one of the characters. And you just like, when you watch it, number one, it's horrible. But number two, you can see he already has the most charisma on the screen in the whole thing. When he walks in,
Cool.
Everybody's like, you can see, well, this guy's going to be a star. But that's the kind of thing. So these movies would be shorter than the main event. They'd usually never run 90 minutes. They always run like almost 70 minutes, 75 minutes at the most. And they'd be made as cheap as possible. In the 1940s, they would use old Western sets.
Neat.
And so they would just go like, okay, we've got these Western sets that were built in the 1930s for the original John Wayne movies and things like that. So now we're going to make a Western out here. And we can make it cheap because we don't have to build the sets or do anything like that. And then we can, script, okay, you wrote something? Great, we're going to shoot it, and it's going to be put on so people have something to watch before the main event. And in the 1950s, that's when it became like horror and sci-fi movies and things like that.
Okay.
And they'd reuse sets, they'd get cheapo scripts and things like that. So the reason that you love Joe Bob Briggs is because instead of denigrating B pictures, instead of denigrating genre films. And I went to film school in the 90s, and at film school in the 90s, there was a sense of there's art films and films done for art's sake that are beautiful and slow and incredibly boring. And then there's the other stuff that you got, there's horror movies, right? And there's entertaining movies. And so it was almost, they talked about movies as art and movies as salami or whatever. And the B movies and the horror movies and the things that I liked were the salami, and my professors liked the high art. They liked the gourmet stuff. What Joe Bob Briggs did is he brought the film critic sensibility to B movies. He learned how to appreciate it. He learned how to treat them as the art form that they were, because a lot of times you have to be extra creative. You have to be extra exploitative, in the words. It's like, okay, well, this scene's pretty boring. Not if we put a naked girl in it. Not if the creature ends up biting a guy's arm off. Good idea. So it's celebrating that kind of creativity and celebrating the work that these people put into these films. Because even though they are the stepchildren, they literally are the stepchildren. They are the
right.
the redheaded cousin.
Hey.
The redheaded, well, I'm a ginger beard, you know me. But the redheaded cousin that doesn't get the same respect as the main event. And Joe Bob Briggs treated these films with the respect and affection that I've always felt they deserved. And he's got his new show, The Last Drive-In, which is just coming on to the Shudder Network. And it celebrates all these films. He's also got a one-man show with we chose 250 clips. We talk about this in the interview, and he's going to be doing it in Milwaukee on Saturday, April 6th. So let's start out by talking to the people who start this event, which is celebrating low-budget, independent horror genre films, people who are making B movies for us. And you have a chance to see 100 of them in Milwaukee this weekend. So let's talk to the guys from the Twisted Dreams Film Festival. I'm excited to bring on the co-directors of the Milwaukee Twisted Dreams Film Festival, and that's Steve Millick and Chris House. Hello, gentlemen. How are we doing in Brew City today?
Doing great. Yeah. Day here. It's looking
fantastic.
Good. So it's going to be good times coming up.
All right. So this festival is going to be starting on April 4th. It's April 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th. And can you give us a little idea about what Twisted Dreams is all about?
Oh, it's all about horror films. It's a celebration of the macabre. That was our tagline from the beginning. It's just really just a collection of some of the most amazing independent films from around the world.
Yeah. One of the things we wanted to do is highlight different aspects of horror, and that's one of the things I love about the festival. Is that it's what some people consider horror and other people is always this argument, but there's lots of different ways you can interpret horror, and we try to find all kinds of different variety of horror films. And I think this year we have a really great selection and like a variety. It's our first year. We have a comedy block and a monster block, so we have everything you can every different kind of horror you could think of. We'll have.
That's awesome. So, what is your background? Are you guys filmmakers yourself, or are you just horror fans? I mean, it is a pain in the butt to put together an event, especially something over 4 days, getting everybody together and the theaters and the whole thing. What inspired you to want to put together a genre festival like this in Milwaukee?
Well, we decided that, cities around Milwaukee, like Chicago, Madison, Oshkosh, literally this circle around Milwaukee all had great horror film festivals, but there was nothing in Milwaukee at the time. We had a couple of short-lived horror film festivals, but nothing that really stuck around. So we decided if nobody's going to do it, we might as well do it ourselves. So our first year, we knew nothing about film festivals. We're big film festival fans. We've been to a lot of film festivals, so we kind of emulated everything that we saw at a big film festival and tried to do that on our own.
Yeah, it was a little tough getting started. Yeah, pretty much just jumped in deep first and winged the first year, and and every year we learned something a little different. But trying to start something new, and we knew there was a big horror base here in Milwaukee. Lots of great horror fans, but we wanted to give them something of their own instead of having to travel a couple hours to someplace else. So that was the inspiration. That's why we wanted to do it.
Well, and as someone that grew up in Milwaukee and was a sponsor of the Madison Horror Film Festival for several years,
Oh, wow.
the guy that ran that used to live in my condo. So I completely appreciate and support what you guys are doing, and it's awesome. So to give people maybe a little more insight into you, why don't you guys both give us a couple of your favorite horror movies? And, ones that inspired you. And it can be a deep cut if you want, or we won't even judge if it's something pedestrian. I mean, judge a little, but not too much.
Yeah. Well, for me, I know that a lot of horror fans will disagree, and they call me not a real horror fan, but I say The Exorcist is one of the best horror films ever made. I mean, it's truly a classic. My favorite movie of all time is Jaws, although I don't know if I'd classify that as really a horror film or an action and adventure horror film. But
I think the girl in the bikini in the beginning, she classifies it as a horror film.
yeah, but Jaws is my favorite movie. I love The Exorcist. I love the classics: Nightmare on Elm Street, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Evil Dead. I love all those movies.
So.
And
as a kid, for me growing up, I was lucky because my mom loved movies, and I grew up in the 80s. So, she took me to all these movies. I got to see Evil Dead 2 in the theater. I got to see Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 in the theater. So I was pretty lucky. My mom would probably be really harshly judged today by bringing me to those kinds of movies.
Yeah.
But
forget about it. Bringing a kid to see. The thing is, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, classic, based on our man Ed Gein in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
So shout out to Plainfield, y'all.
Yeah.
No, but I remember watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre as like a 12-year-old when it was first shown on like Channel 18.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to hide it or whatever. Like I taped it. I told my parents I was taping something else because my parents were cool about horror movies, but they showed me Night of the Living Dead when I was 6, and I cried so much they were like, "We're gonna keep you from horror movies for a while." And so the fact that your mom, especially even at like Evil Dead 2 was a mainstream release, but it still wasn't, what eventually it would become. And Sam Raimi still wasn't the director that he would eventually be, like the Spider-Man guy. I mean, he was still in the days of, his B movie kind of days. So that's a real lucky thing that your mom loved movies and would love to expose you to them, especially because now, I mean, if you brought a kid into the theater, like all the other parents would be like, should we call Child Protective Services?
Exactly.
So what are some of your favorites, Steve?
So, my first exposure to horror films, I was in 4th grade. I went to my first sleepover, and like a bunch of guys, like kids, and we're just like, friend punch, put in some horror films. So, I've been in for Nightmare on Elm Street is the first horror film I watched, so that was ingrained in me. It's one of my favorites. The Stuff there's another one like that was like a 1-2 film for the night. It was sort of Nightmare on Elm Street and stuff. So I was hooked on horror.
All right. And R.I.P. Larry Cohen. He just died this week.
Mhm.
I know that's very sad. So yeah, I mean that's what got me into horror. And me and my friend, we would go to the video store and rent horror films. My mom was not happy about it. She did not. She's like, why can't you rent Disney films? Why do you need to rent horror films? She didn't stop us, but she, made it clear she was not totally on board with it. But yeah, she didn't stop us. So we watched some horror films, and just I've always enjoyed the horror film. So yeah, I don't know. That's how it all kind of came about.
Sure. It's that thing like when you're a kid and it's a little bit the forbiddenness of it, a little bit,
Right.
the nature of it, that this is for older kids, and then it's the transgression and the gruesomeness. I mean, we all had that like one friend whose parents let him watch horror films. Chris, it sounds like you were that friend for a lot of people.
Yeah, I was that kid. Yeah.
Right.
And I remember, so one sleepover, like in 5th grade, we're at, he's like, in the card for the invitation for the sleepover, it said, warning, we're going to watch horror movies here. So if your kid's not into horror movies, then, he might not want to come. And so we watched House 2 and Hellraiser. We were all, maybe this is
All
6th
right.
grade or 5th grade or whatever. So House 2 and Hellraiser. House 2, the lesser of the houses, but still had some good moments. But so in the middle of Hellraiser, like our dad's friend runs into the room wearing a mask and a chainsaw. And he's just like, ah! And you could see all like a bunch of 11-year-old boys, like, everybody pee to touch. Just a little bit. And then later on, when we were watching House, like he was peeking in through the windows and doing his best to scare the crap out of us. And you just have those moments that it's that not only were you having fun watching the horror movie and there's the excitement in your heart when you're watching it, it's also everything gets amplified and the emotions get amplified because you think that your friend's dad might kill you.
Yeah. And you touched on something there that you were watching with a group of friends. That's really the best way to watch a horror film in a group of friends. And that's another reason why we started the festival, to get a group of people together to watch these movies because you feed off the excitement of each other.
And when you're talking about the excitement of watching the movies, what are some of the movies that you guys are most excited about showing people and maybe premiering or that you're excited you're able to present to the world? Are there any particular favorites this year that you guys are super excited about?
Well, for me, I think Amazon Hotbox is probably my most anticipated one. I think it's just a crazy, exploitation grindhouse kind of film. I'm really looking forward to that. Fang is another one that I'm looking forward to. That's got great special effects. Live Scream, which is our first feature-length animated film. There's just so many. It's hard to pick. It's like picking a favorite child. We love all these movies.
I know, yeah. So we picked them all, so these are ones we love. I am excited to see people's reaction to Amazon Hotbox because it is just this crazy exploitation film that is just going to blow people's minds. So
let me read the description of Amazon
All right.
Hotbox real quick. An American college student named Penny is erroneously apprehended during a dissident roundup in the Banana Republic of Radica. She is incarcerated into the island penal system overseen by Wardress von Krupp, who is constructing the world's greatest information extractor. Crocodiles, religious zealots, psycho inmates, and voodoo-based experiments block her every escape. Life is cheap, and the jungle explodes in Amazon Hotbox. Number one, I love that because first of all, I thought it was going to be some kind of like cannibal holocaust kind of thing, but it's like, oh no, now we're moving to a women in prison movie.
Right, it's a women, and it's a little bit of everything. Like if you love '70s exploitation, the women in prison, Nazi, wardens. It's just crazy, and the plot's secondary, but it's just every scene is something even more crazy than a scene previous. So it's just it's just a trip to watch that. So I'm excited to see that in the theater with a group of people because that's the kind of one I want to see how people react to that because it's going to be insane.
Awesome.
Another one of my movies that I'm excited for is Straight Edge Kegger. It's a little bit more of a slow burn, so starts off a little bit slow, but it's got this really cool story about this guy that's trying to leave this cult-like straight edge gang and the consequences of what happens after he leaves. But it's been getting like really good positive reviews, so I'm glad that we're gonna be able to. We had the Wisconsin premiere, so So yeah, excited for that, just to see people's reaction to that one.
And let me read the description of Straight Edge Krieger here because I love it. A young punk and a house full of drunks
Right.
square off against a gang of militant straight edgers that he's abandoned. And it sounds like, Green Room meets Assault on Precinct 13 or something like that. Like that idea.
Yeah, and I honestly, I didn't know that much about the straight edgers. I didn't know that was a big thing in the punk scene, but so it's like an interesting, and has like that little bit of morality tale. Like sometimes you try to do good, and you take it too far, and you're now no longer the good person. So it's got some interesting things about just a society, as we are. So I'm excited for that one. I like that. It was one of my
It
favorites.
sounds like it has a lot of violence too, and I like that.
Oh yeah, it goes crazy at some point, and just total violence. So
Sweet. I'm also interested in, and this is perfect for fans of our podcast because we discuss cryptids all the time. Cryptid, if this is the first time you're listening, or if you're only listening because you heard that the Twisted Dreams guys are going to be on, or Joe Bob Briggs was going to be on. The Lake Michigan monster. So a cryptid is an animal whose existence, is rumored but yet not yet proven. So like Loch Ness monster, Bigfoot, or creatures like that. And so at 7:15 p.m. on Sunday, this looks like it's a closer of the festival.
Yes.
It's going to be the Lake Michigan monster. So let's talk a little bit about this movie. Was this done by, is this a local guy? Is it a Chicago guy? Who is Ryland Tews?
Yeah, he's a local Milwaukee filmmaker. I had never heard of him until this movie started making the film festival rounds, and yeah, it's just this bizarre monster comedy about this sea captain trying to avenge his father's death from this monster that lives in Lake Michigan. Yeah, it's just this crazy fun film.
It's like Moby Dick set on Lake Michigan.
With a lot more comedy.
Moby Dick on Lake Michigan versus a sea monster, versus a Lovecraftian sea monster. That sounds like a recipe for Wisconsin pride, guys.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this movie, it's been playing at a lot of film festivals, especially in Wisconsin. So we're pretty happy to have it.
Yeah, and that's exciting. Because the thing is, I don't know if you guys realize that when I was growing up, we never heard about all the different monsters that inhabited the lakes around Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
So like it wasn't until you start looking into newspapers from the 19th century and you realize that Lake Geneva had their own sea monster. We had a sea monster in Madison on Lake Monona and Mendota in the early 1920s. He became they was in all the papers, and the students called him Bajo.
Huh.
Short for like Winnie Bajo, which is a Native American word for like some kind of like lake spirit kind of thing. I'm probably butchering that a little bit, but it was. And now we even call there's a local like blog in Madison called the Bajo, named after our own kind of Nessie.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so much fun that in we think like, oh no, all the fun monsters are in Europe or they're in other parts of the country, and it's like, no, we have plenty right here, and so the Lake Michigan monster sounds like a real exciting one, and I can't wait to check that out. So you guys are having not only movies, but it's also going to be panel discussions and things like that. So can you preview maybe a couple of the panels or a couple of things that you're doing maybe for filmmakers or just film fans?
So we've got two panels going on, mostly for filmmakers, but fans are more than welcome to come. The first panel is actually a fascinating panel on Saturday. We're talking about short films and like the art of making a short film. So a lot of people dismiss short films just because they're just like, oh, they're shorts and they don't really count. But what fascinates me about short films is that you can tell us a really good story in 10 minutes. So, and this is kind of talking about how to tell this story that, some people might take an hour and a half or whatever, but you can tell it in 10 minutes and make it a really compelling, have all like the 3-act structure and stuff. So that's going to be Saturday. It's called The Art of Short Filmmaking. Our friend Ron Purdy is going to be hosting that with group of great talented filmmakers going to be part of that panel. Then on Sunday, we're going to talk about more geared toward filmmakers and how to distribute their films once they're made. A lot of films at festivals are independent, homemade, um, especially at smaller festivals like ours, and not, premiering at Sundance where they're going to get picked up. So kind of wanted to have an information thing for filmmakers to how to help get their film released and find studios and get more people to see it, because really that's the ultimate goal of filmmakers, is get people to see their film. So the panel on Sunday is kind of geared towards that, trying to get talking to filmmakers who have done it and giving them tips on what to do.
That sounds awesome. And Saturday night, obviously, you guys have a real, a really exciting, presentation for Milwaukee. Particularly, is that you got your special event at 7 p.m. on Saturday, April 6th. How the Rednecks Saved Hollywood, hosted by Joe Bob Briggs. How did you get the man behind the B movie come to Milwaukee?
Well, we just asked him.
Awesome.
We just asked him. No, it was Steve contacted his assistant, and we went back and forth for a while, and eventually we reached an agreement. And he's coming out, and pretty excited. Tickets are pretty cheap compared to what they were at South by Southwest. I heard they were, selling secondhand for upwards to $500. So you can come see him at our festival for $20. Get the same show.
Yeah, it was really exciting when we were down at South by. You could see, Joe Bob Briggs. They had his posters all over the place. And everybody was really excited about it. And then he's just like, well, yeah, I'm going to be in Milwaukee too. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
You're like,
did he mention that down there?
Yeah. No, he mentioned it when I was interviewing him, and we're going to get to that just in a couple of minutes. Our conversation with Joe Bob Briggs of South by, and he's like, well, I'm doing it in Milwaukee too. I'm like, what? That's awesome. And so I got really excited. To know that he was coming to our home, to talk about these same kind of things. And just to preview that to you guys, it's he uses like 250 clips to talk about the history of rednecks in America as told through like classic B movies, some mainstream stuff, and how Hollywood and the film industry has used rednecks in ways that you don't even understand. And so that's going to be 7 p.m. And tickets for all this stuff are at twisteddreamsff.com.
Mm-hmm.
If you're interested in coming, if you're anywhere in the Midwest, it's going to be worth checking out. twisteddreamsff.com. And of course, we'll have links to that in our show notes at othersidepodcast.com/242. Now, Chris, I had a question for you in particular, because obviously we're really into the paranormal here. And I know you're a member of the Paranormal Investigators of Milwaukee. And my sister was associated with you guys. Allison from Milwaukee Ghost was associated with you guys for a long time.
Oh, yeah. Allison Jordan?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I know her. Very nice.
Yeah. So we always call, like ghost stories and weird stuff, the family business.
Yeah. Nice. So
as a paranormal investigator, do you feel that like horror films maybe have inspired, are one of the inspirations as to why you started wanting to learn more about the strange world on the other side?
I think so, yeah. Being that I was, so young when I started watching horror films, I was more, scared of the dark, I guess, maybe, scared of the unknown. So I think that, it definitely helped develop my passion for the paranormal. I love investigating. I love the paranormal. I love the whole aspect of, haunted houses and ghosts and all that kind of stuff. So I think so.
So you've been on a lot of investigations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you've seen plenty of paranormal TV. We've all had our moments with the ghost hunters and Zach Baggins and his ghost adventures crew, brother.
Yep. Hollywood Baggins.
All right. So do you feel there's any particular film that really represents what it's like to go on a modern paranormal investigation?
That's a good question. There's a movie called Grave Encounters, which is about a paranormal investigator that kind of gets trapped on a location. That one I really liked. I know a lot of paranormal investigators don't really like that movie, but that's one that I really feel that represents, what actual paranormal investigating is about. So it's called Grave Encounters. They made a sequel to it too. So, but check out part 1.
All right, and that sounds like a good one that maybe a lot of people haven't seen too.
Yeah, it's an unknown. It's an unknown film for sure.
That's a good recommendation. Like I always thought one of the one of the best examples of how real paranormal investigation happens was the Blair Witch Project, actually, because
Yeah, that's a good one.
nothing happens for 2 hours.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
So-
that's what paranormal investigating is. You
That's
know,
just like it.
sitting in the dark all night talking to yourself.
And if there was a movie just about reviewing footage and listening for EVPs, that's the one I'd like to see as well. Where it's just like a guy with headphones on sitting in front of a computer for 6 hours hoping to see something.
That sums it up. Yep.
Sounds kind of like The Conversation. Is that old Gene Hackman film? And he sits there and listens to conversations, although not paranormal, but it's the same concept. Just sitting there.
No, that's exactly right, though. I've never even thought about it like that. Right? That's Francis Ford Coppola from like 1974. That's the one he made after. Was it before or after?
It was in between
The Godfathers.
I think it was in between The Godfathers, I think, or something like that. It was around there, but I think it was in between.
Right. You want to talk about a guy at the top of his game? Godfather, then The Conversation, then The Godfather 2. Like he should have just took all the awards.
Right. So yeah, but I mean that's kind of like the same thing. Like it's a very slow moving film that this guy is re-listening to conversation. I can't remember the whole plot of the movie, but I just remember just watching. Oh, this is very compelling for a guy just listening and re-listening to something. You know. So.
Oh my God, that's a right. Make a movie called The EVP.
Right.
And that's a.
That'd be a pretty boring conversation.
I'm watching
pretty boring film if you listen to that.
So that's great. So where are some of the theaters you guys are having this stuff at?
Yes, it's all at the Time Cinema in Milwaukee here. So all the films are going to be there.
All right, cool. So the Milwaukee Twisted Dreams Film Festival next week at the Times Cinema, April 4th through 7th. It's a chance to support local and independent filmmakers, number one, and also see the kind of stuff you're never going to, you never have a chance to see, and it's all curated. So it's always going to be pretty good. Sponsored by some of the sponsors are the Paranormal Investigators of Milwaukee, the Milwaukee Paranormal Conference, who we're obviously in bed with because we love what T's doing. And you guys are having a award show too, right?
We're not going to have it. We're having an opening night party. We'll give away a few awards there. We're not having a specific award show. We usually give away our awards after, announce the awards after the festival. But we'll have an opening night party. Well, we'll talk about Friday night because it's a big night.
Yeah, Friday we're giving Mark Borchardt his Backbone of Horror award.
And Mark Borchardt, to everybody, is the featured filmmaker in the movie American Movie.
Right.
If you guys haven't seen it, it's a documentary. I think it's on Netflix. But it's even if it's not, it's worth watching because he's a horror filmmaker from Milwaukee, and it's about his struggles and his can-do attitude in the face of tons of adversity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's done by Chris Smith, who just did the Firefest documentary for Netflix. That's brilliant.
Right. So yeah, we start off Friday with like a block of local films, like all from Wisconsin, so from all around Wisconsin, and stick around and give him Mark Borchardt be there. Receiving his Backbone of Wisconsin Horror. He's influenced so many people. It's amazing how many people come up to us like, "Oh, do you know Mark? He's done this for me. He's such an influence on me." It's just like, his can-do attitude is just never say die. It's just that it's catchy, and that's why people want to make films because of what he did. So it's like there's no one more deserving than him for this, inspiring people.
And if you talk to Mark. He doesn't want anything to do with American Movie. He doesn't want to be associated with it. Just doesn't want to.
Oh no.
Yeah, he wants to be known for his own thing. So
sure. I mean, I can completely understand that too. That's my introduction to him.
Yep. Same here.
Right. Well, I mean, that's everyone's. And that's kind of like how it's weird. Yeah, it's like that's how people know him. But so yeah, he's such an inspiration to people.
It's funny. My brother-in-law. He's like an amateur photographer, and so he's out there. He was like at the drive-in or whatever, like in the late 90s, and he sees all these people dressed up strange. And because he's married to my sister Allison Jorlin, who's loves the weird, he was like, "Holy crap!" And he's taking these pictures and he, comes back and tells her, like, I saw all these people dressed up like it was some kind of religious ceremony, and I don't know exactly what it's all about. And they thought it was some kind of cult activity or whatever until they saw American Movie and they realized he had stumbled on the shooting of Coven.
Really?
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome.
Like, what a random thing, like like the right place at the right time, I guess. And then he's like, I didn't know what I saw. And then I saw the movie. I'm like, oh my God, they were just shooting the horror movie. So, all right. If people want to learn, more about you guys as individuals or artists or anything like that, is there a website, or can they follow you on Twitter or anything like that?
Yeah, follow me on Twitter. I'm more active on Facebook. Just look me up, Christopher Kai House.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter also. I forgot my Twitter. I don't use Twitter a whole lot, but feel free to seek me out. I'm at Movie RPH.
All right.
So check us out.
It's such a boring Twitter handle. He used to be the Film Bully. I talked him into being the Film Bully for a while, but he changed it back. I don't know why. Movie RPH is just boring. Come on, Steve, you got to change it back.
Yeah.
Why? I got to come up with something different. I know. I was just thinking. I was like, it's kind of boring. So
you could be shaming people online for their poor film choices.
Could be.
Which I think that might be the only good reason to shame people online, is because they don't appreciate good movies, or even appreciate classic B movies, like our next guest will. And coming up is our conversation with Joe Bob Briggs from South by Southwest, and you can see Joe Bob do his How Rednecks Saved Hollywood at the Milwaukee Twisted Dreams Film Festival, Saturday, April 6th at 7 o'clock. And we encourage you guys to go to the whole festival and support local filmmakers, independent, and cool genre horror as much as possible. And you can find all of that at twisteddreamsff.com. Steve and Chris, thank you very much for your time this morning. Appreciate it. Good luck with the film festival. We hope it kills.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Starting up a conversation, number one, with one of my B-movie heroes, Joe Bob Briggs. And Joe Bob, thank you very much for joining us today, talking for a couple of minutes about what you're up to. One of the things about, I'd say, horror, sci-fi, all the great stuff from the 50s and 60s and 70s that we love, is that they were trying to make a great movie. You know what I mean? And in the end, it turned out to be something that often was so bad it was good. So do you have any movies that you've seen and presented that are like, you thought they were going to be like almost great, and it just like came to the edge? Like, what's an unsung film that maybe never, like, was almost there but didn't quite get there?
One that comes to mind immediately is a film called Wolfen. That's about these rampaging, rabid spirit wolf creatures that rampage through the Bronx. First movie I think that ever used the Steadicam, and so it's kind of scary because you see the wolves going through the debris of the Bronx. But the reason that the horror and sci-fi movies of the 50s, 60s, and 70s sometimes fall short, as you might point out, is that there was no big budget horror and sci-fi. All horror and sci-fi were despised genres. Anything that had aliens, spaceships, monsters, ghosts, that was all low budget stuff because the studios wouldn't make that stuff. So you had not until like 2001: A Space Odyssey and Star Wars. Those were the first two big budget sci-fi movies. Big budget horror doesn't exist really until, I don't know, like the Stand miniseries in 1990. Yeah. So everything that was made in the 50s and 60s and 70s that we call genre films was low budget. So it's a miracle if they make a great film. They had no resources, but nevertheless, we have some great films from those periods.
But I love you talking about Wolfen. It's also written by the same guy that wrote Communion. So Whitley Strieber, who started off as a genre kind of author and everything, became a paranormal guy and basically invented the whole gray alien like trope, because we all saw that Communion book in the the grocery stores had like this alien abduction book on their shelves. So no, I haven't seen Wolfen in about 15 years, and that is a fine pick. So there wasn't a big budget and everything like that. And what would you say is like the Stand miniseries, Mick Garris, that's Stephen King, like 4 different nights. I remember that very well. That was my prom weekend, and I remember I had to tape like the last episode of The Stand so I could make sure they could see it because I had to go to prom. But what do you think's changed a little bit in like modern horror? Now, the stuff you're presenting on The Last Drive-In, obviously you started with Tourist Trap, which is a movie that I thought I made up. Like, I'm like, yeah, the guy from The Rifleman, like turning people into mannequins. I'm like, that's a real movie. And so, but take films like that and like that classic drive-in movies. And actually, I should ask, what is your definition of a drive-in film? Like we just said, genre films and stuff like that. But what would be the kind of like that you present specifically on The Last Drive-In?
Well, I asked Roger Corman years ago, what are the basic elements of the exploitation film? And he gave me a long academic answer, but I refined that down into the 3 B's: blood, breasts, and beasts. If you have all 3, you got a drive-in movie. And there are periods where other genres come and go, like kung fu. There's periods where we watch martial arts, periods where we don't watch martial arts. But horror is forever. Sci-fi is forever. Monster movies are forever. And so those are the basics of the drive-in film.
What was your first one? What was your gateway?
My gateway film for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original one in the 70s. That was the first movie I ever saw where I thought, this movie actually could have been made by a maniac. And so, when you watch it a second or a third time, you start to see the comedy elements in it. But when you watch it the first time, it's a terrifying film. That's why I always tell these guys, these young filmmakers that want to make horror comedy, somehow they think that's going to be easier. And say, watch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It has a lot of comedy in it, but you don't get to do the comedy unless you do the horror right first.
Well, I love it. And Texas Chainsaw Massacre was actually filmed right here in Austin. Toby Hooper and stuff right down here. I was talking about that with a crew yesterday we talked to a couple of horror comedy people, and I said, finding that right balance, between the jokes into the terror and stuff like that. So speaking of horror comedy, I like that you picked Texas Chainsaw because it does have like the grandfather like sucking on her finger and stuff. You get grossed out. You're like, oh my God. But then the third time you watch it, you're like, this part's hilarious kind of thing. So maybe, what are a couple of your favorite horror comedy films that you think find the balance exactly right?
I'll tell you what the balance is. The balance is 80% horror, 20% comedy. If you go 80% comedy, 20% horror, it doesn't work. Then you get Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, but Basket Case has it exactly right. There's very funny things in Basket Case, but it's basically a horror film. It's a strong horror film. I mean, the climactic scene where the monster commits a rape is a very, very difficult scene to watch, and yet it's hysterical. I mean, it's just like Basket Case is one of those movies that gives you the creeps because of what you're feeling, and you're ashamed of what you're feeling. You're ashamed of what you're laughing at. That's a good horror comedy.
Sounds good. As someone that has enjoyed genre films and has done a lot of film criticism yourself, what's a film that you think the best written horror film? Maybe not the best committed to actual celluloid, but what do you think where the writer had a fantastic idea, the dialogue was great, and where you're sitting there going, the guy that wrote this really knew what he was doing?
Well, if you're talking about international films, I would say Daughters of Darkness is a great Belgian, probably the best Belgian horror film. Maybe the only Belgian horror film, but mainly because European writers do something that do one thing better than American writers, and that is they can write screenplays that have virtually no dialogue. There's very little dialogue in Daughters of Darkness. What there is very well written, but it's a pure screenplay in that it's all about the action, and it's very subtle action. I mean, it's just 4 characters in an empty hotel, and yet it's compelling from beginning to end. I would say that's really fine screenwriting.
That's a great example, too, because the whole idea is that a really great movie could be one that you could watch without the sound on, right? And then still enjoy the film and know what's going on, because otherwise you're just looking at a book like a minute at the screen. Now, we do paranormal stuff. So, have you ever seen a ghost?
I've never seen a ghost. I haven't really tried hard to see a ghost. I'm not really a ghost person. I do like ghost stories but I'll tell you the secret to great ghost stories. The ghost needs to be a child, and the child needs to be an asshole. The angry, vindictive child is the best ghost ever. Yeah, or the changeling. That's a good ghost. Yeah. So, So my advice to I hate the ghost movies where the ghost is trying to be your friend. Those are not fun at all. But the vengeance-seeking, angry, dead child ghost, I love those.
That sounds good. So, the means of production now are a lot easier than ever, right? Anybody can get we're talking today on just the camera, having fun, and people can make great-looking films for not a lot of money. Is there any films that came out in the past couple of years that you think captures that spirit of the drive-in that you grew up loving?
House of the Devil, definitely. Deathgasm. Have you seen Deathgasm? That's one of the movies from the old genre. Doesn't exist anymore. About maybe there are satanic messages in the music, and maybe that if you play the music in a certain sort of way, the devil appears. Yeah.
There's an amazing stories episode that does it, where the kids play the record backwards and whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
Christopher Lloyd comes back from the dead.
Yeah. So it's one of those. Obviously, Get Out. Shape of Water is a monster movie. It won the Academy Award. So. Yeah.
The Sex Lagoon.
Yeah, exactly. Who would think that a rubber suit monster in 2018 would win the Academy Award, but it did. We kind of live in we live in the age of retro horror, where everyone's looking back and trying to remake stuff from previous eras. That's not good. That's not good for the long term. We need to be making new scary films.
Absolutely. And just to final up, so the show that you're doing tonight, How Rednecks Saved Hollywood, you're also going to be doing it at the Twisted Dreams Festival in Milwaukee. Give us, why should people come to that festival? What are they going to see?
Well, first of all, I hope all the rednecks in Milwaukee will show up for the show. Okay. I want both rednecks from Milwaukee to show up for the show. It's the show is a whole history of the redneck, the 400-year history of the redneck, as told through cinema, and then it's 250 clips and stills. It goes really fast. It's basically a stand-up act with clips, but I've done it all over the country. I used to only do it in the South because it's very, very politically incorrect. I used to only do it in cities that love their Confederate monuments, and then a guy asked me to do it. Okay. A guy asked me to do it in Boston, and I said, I don't know if I can go there. And he said, no, they'll love you. And I said, well, be sure to get all the rednecks to the show. And so I did it in Boston, and I survived. And so since then, I've done it. I did it in Minneapolis. I've done it in other northern cities. So I'm counting on the alcoholic history of Milwaukee to serve me well as I tell the story of the guys who fought the Whiskey Rebellion.
Awesome. And so when you crashed the Shudder servers last year, like it really was like a story that was like lighting up my Twitter feed because I follow all these horror guys and stuff. And did you realize that your movie marathon would break Shudder?
No, when it first happened, I was kind of pissed off. It was like people were calling me up saying, "Joe Bob, you realize what happened? You just crashed Shudder." And I just didn't just crash Shudder. I crashed the Sundance channel too. And they said, "You crashed the internet." I said, "Well, was anybody able to watch the show?" "No, isn't it great? It's wonderful. Nobody saw the show." And I'm like, we worked kind of hard on that show. And it was like, "No, this is great. This is the best thing that could ever happen. People love you. They didn't see the show. How could they love me?" It was like, and so fortunately, they were able to put it up on demand, and people were able to watch it later. So it was probably good publicity for the show that they couldn't watch it.
So one last question. What movie have you not featured yet that you're dying to feature? Like if there's a season 2 or you get another shot or you're like, man, we just never had a chance to get this movie. So what movies would you like to Monster Vision for us?
I would love to show The Howling 7, the movie that killed the Howling franchise. One of the worst movies ever made, but it has a certain cult value. We've tried to get it. We can't find it. They put a new title on it to disguise the fact that it's The Howling 7. They now call it The Howling New Moon Rising. But it's still The Howling 7, and we would still love to show it, but we just can't find anybody that can sell it to us. It's unclear who owns it. But we would like to show that. We would like to have a Friday the 13th marathon, which is something I did on the Monster Vision years ago. Because young people who binge watch the Friday the 13th series have very strong opinions about which one is better than the others. If you watched them like me, they came every couple of years there was one, so they all blend together. I have no idea the difference between Friday the 13th 5 and Friday the 13th 3. Exactly. So I don't know. I don't understand the raging online arguments about which Friday the 13th is better. So I want to have a marathon where we can sort it all out once and for all.
Well, hopefully we can do that in Madison. The Howling is an excellent pick too, because they lost me after they went to Australia or whatever. We're like the Howling, the marsupials, like the marsupial werewolf. They were done. That's perfect. Anyway, thank you very much, Joe Bob. And you have a website that people can go to if they want to learn more about you?
I'm everywhere. Yeah, you can go to joebobbriggs.com and write to me. Or
your Twitter is like the real Joe Bob?
Twitter is the real Joe Bob. That's where I am most days, yeah.
Thank you so much. All right, and so I did kind of fanboy out there when we were at the table. Like I had a beer to calm my nerves or whatever. I was like, I just have a beer, sit there. And to let you guys in on the situation, so we were in this hotel at South by Southwest, and it's packed with people. Everybody's running around
In the lobby of the hotel, yeah.
right in the lobby of the hotel. And Joe Bob's assistant was like, okay, well, if you can catch him for a few minutes, we can do an interview in person today. I'm like, fantastic. And everybody's talking. I'm like, how is this going to work? Like, and how is he going to know who we are? Like, I had to email his assistant. I'm like, tell him I'm the guy with the scarf. I'm the guy with the scarf, and I had a guitar with us too. And so it was just one of those things where you're like, oh my God, I really hope this works. And when it finally did, and you find out he's charming, funny, loves to talk about this stuff. Like he even put up with all of my, questions where he must have been like, another guy that thinks he knows about movies, but he's just kidding himself. And he did it with aplomb. So If you're in Milwaukee this weekend, make sure to check out his awesome live show, How the Redneck Saved Hollywood, and you're going to have a great time. And make sure to check out the Twisted Dreams Film Festival. All right. My favorite quote from Joe Bob is probably the one about the 3 Bs, Wendy.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Right, because we're talking about the things that a good B movie needs. And number one, it's probably going to have some violence in it because it's appealing to the lowest common denominator.
Yeah, true.
Right? Because the thing is there's artwork and then there's the lowest common denominator stuff. And sometimes you love the lowest common denominator. You know, sometimes Neanderthals like me just like to watch a bunch of guys punch each other. And so
Wow.
the first B in a grade B movie is going to have blood, cheap, gross out special effects, you know, things like that to shock you. The second of Joe's B's obviously is breasts. And they'll have naked girls to titillate you when the scene gets a little boring and
jeez.
they think people aren't paying attention. It's like, oh, you aren't paying attention? Okay, let's take off a bra. And then you got to have monsters, right? There's got to be something that's going after the people in a classic horror movie, and that's
Yes,
beasts.
definitely.
And so Joe Bob's 3 Bs are what inspired the song for the week. And you guys can find that song in the show notes, othersidepodcast.com/242. So othersidepodcast.com/242, or you can find it in our See You on the Other Side playlist on Spotify. And that's where you can check out, inspired by Joe Bob and his love of B movies, it's Sunspot with blood, breasts, and beasts. Now, our Patreon members are going to get that song right in their inbox with an MP3 because we love them, right?
Oh, absolutely love them. And we're recording this on April Fool's Day, Mike, but our Patreon members are no fools.
They are no fools. They're our favorite.
And they're awesome people that we love talking to in our monthly hangouts and Skype. And in our Facebook page, we've got conversations going on all the time.
That's right. We love to get tips from everybody for great story ideas and great podcast ideas. We love to talk about our favorite films. A lot of times the Hangouts we talk about ghost stories we saw last week, experiences we've had, experiences that we've talked to people about, and then we talk about horror movies a lot of the time.
Oh, and I think maybe this month we should watch that movie that was recommended in the interview. What was it? Grave Danger?
Oh, that's right.
The ghost hunting movie. So
Yes.
that might be a good one for us to watch and discuss in our Patreon group. But if you want to become a member of that group, it's really easy. All you have to do is visit othersidepodcast.com/donate. And we have a special shout out, Mike.
That's right. Dr. Ned. Dr. Ned is at the Patreon level where he's like an executive producer of our B-movie life,
Yes.
where he gets a shout out in every single episode. Dr. Ned, thank you so much for your support. See You on the Other Side wouldn't be happening without it.
Yes. And thanks to each and every one of our community members. We hope you'll join us. It's a lot of fun.
Yes, that's going to be at othersidepodcast.com/donate.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. You can find us online at othersidepodcast.com. Until next time, see you on the other side.
The ghost needs to be a child, and the child needs to be an asshole. The angry, vindictive child is the best ghost ever.